actually puts pressure on the WNBA, I am not sure where you are getting that idea from. I am not sure who's in your ear actually saying this to you. Hey, Napheesa, they could just play it Unrivaled. They've always had places that they can go. Unrivaled doesn't pay what the WNBA is planning on paying. Unrivaled doesn't offer what the WNBA is planning on.
Did you catch that? Napheesa Collier just said the quiet part out loud. We have other places we can go. And she's not talking about overseas anymore. She's talking about leveraging her own league against the WNBA while simultaneously serving as the vice president of the Players Association. That's not negotiation strategy. That's a conflict of interest so obvious it's almost impressive that legacy media keeps pretending it doesn't exist.
Napheesa Collier, what do you have to say this time?
Did the W ever have an opportunity to be involved with Unrivaled?
They did, yeah. We did offer equity before we launched, yeah.
And they turned it down?
They did.
What does Unrivaled do to set itself apart and set itself as a potential standard or a comparison for the W?
Everything we're fighting for is salary, benefits, equity in the league. Like, we have all these things without needing to be asked at Unrivaled. Like, we want for nothing here. And not only do we meet like the minimum standards that we're begging for in the WNBA, we exceed them. Players see here what professional life should look like, and so it's really hard when...
Now here's where this gets fascinating. Collier admits on camera that Unrivaled offered the WNBA equity before launch. The league turned it down. So the WNBA saw this coming, evaluated the business proposition, and said no thanks. That's a calculated decision by people who understand the economics of women's basketball better than anyone. But now Collier is using that rejected partnership as leverage in CBA negotiations. She's essentially saying, you didn't want to be partners, so now we're competitors, and you need to pay us more because of it. The problem? Unrivaled doesn't actually compete with the WNBA. It operates during the WNBA offseason. It doesn't offer comparable salaries when you factor in the new WNBA media deal. And most importantly, it has zero leverage without the platform the WNBA provides these players year-round.
It allows us to have leverage. We don't have to just accept anything that you give us, because if you don't give us what we're owed, like, we have other places that we can go.
It allows us to have leverage? If they don't give us what we want, we have other places we can go? And we still have shill paid WNBA media with their acting like chickens with their heads cut off, pretending like they don't see the clear conflict of interest that's going on here? This is clear conflict of interest here. Sets themselves apart. The interviewer saying,
Listen to how this is framed. Everything we're fighting for, we have it Unrivaled, without needing to be asked. Salary, benefits, equity in the league. She's positioning Unrivaled as the gold standard that the WNBA should aspire to match. But let's talk about what she's not mentioning here. Unrivaled pays maybe 30 players total. The WNBA employs 144 players across 12 teams. Unrivaled operates for 8 weeks. The WNBA runs a full season plus playoffs over 5 months. Unrivaled has one investor group funding everything. The WNBA has 12 ownership groups with different financial situations and market sizes. You cannot compare a boutique showcase league to a full professional sports operation. It's like comparing a pop-up restaurant to a national chain and asking why the chain doesn't offer the same white glove service.
They're in Unrivaled. The show media is crazy over here in the WNBA. It's ridiculous. They completely ignore the most obvious issue, and it just doesn't exist. They ignore them.
And there it is. It allows us to have leverage. If you don't give us what we're owed, we have other places we can go. This is the core strategy. Use Unrivaled as a negotiating chip. Threaten to prioritize the off-season league over the main league. Create public pressure by going on sympathetic media platforms that won't ask the obvious follow-up questions. But here's what makes this particularly problematic. Napheesa Collier isn't just a player advocating for better conditions. She's a co-founder and part owner of Unrivaled. She directly profits when Unrivaled succeeds, and she's using her position as WNBPA vice president to promote her own business venture while simultaneously demanding concessions from the league that employs her. That's textbook conflict of interest.
It was so irreverent, most of America couldn't name 2 players, irrelevant perhaps. Now they're a part of popular culture because of one singular player from Iowa, and now they think they got the Jew. Yeah, seriously. This ain't Omar Epps. You don't got the juice now. This isn't that. And here's Napheesa Collier saying, I still back what I said, talking about the end of the season speech towards Kathy Engelbert and the W.
Right now, we have the worst leadership in the world.
Public pressure, I think, is very important when it comes to these things as well. And trying to get things done, like behind closed doors, wasn't working. And I think some things that I heard were wrong. And I just felt like I needed to stand up and to say it. So I still back what I said. I'm glad.
Now watch what happens when a major media outlet tries to spin Unrivaled's television ratings. This tweet from The Athletic's Sabrina Merchant is a masterclass in selective data presentation. She lists every possible positive metric: social media engagement up, streaming numbers up, attendance at live games solid, everything framed as a success story. But notice what's conspicuously absent from this analysis: the actual television viewership numbers compared to last season, because those numbers tell a very different story. According to Sports Business Journal, Unrivaled's television viewership dropped approximately 40% year over year. The championship game, which should have been the peak moment, came in third all-time for the league, and this is only their second season. When your biggest game ever is only the third best rated, and you're already showing 40% declines, that's not growth, that's a warning sign.
But of course you're going to double down on it. This is what I'm talking about. Athletic. You bringing her on just does nothing. It doesn't help them out at all. It just makes it worse for them. It just makes it worse. It was embarrassing, unprofessional, and done as the owners of a competitive league. Seriously. Seriously.
The media response to this data tells you everything you need to know about who's really running the narrative here. When you have to do this much spin, when you have to cherry-pick streaming numbers and social media engagement while completely ignoring television ratings, you're not reporting news. You're doing public relations work. And the WNBA fan base sees right through it. Look at the replies to that Athletic tweet. This is advocacy, not journalism. Mark this as a paid sponsored post. Just show us last year's numbers next to this year's. These aren't casual fans. These are people who've been following women's basketball long enough to recognize when they're being sold a narrative instead of given facts.
It was down around 40% last year. That number that I put in my video on Saturday, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. That's straight from Sports Business Journal. That's not some website I found off a whim to kind of go with what I think. No, that's Sports Business Journal, who's done a lot of good things reporting on Unrivaled, and they've kind of called it a buck on some other things regarding Unrivaled. I'm taking Sports Business Journal's word for it. When they say they're down 40%, I'm taking their word for it. And everybody that's been watching us cover these ratings, we see how much they're down. These are not good numbers. Year over year, playoffs is down. The biggest game of the season only came in.
Here's Collier doubling down on her end-of-season speech, where she called out WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert directly. I still back what I said. I'm glad we did it. I think it helped give us leverage and momentum. She genuinely believes that public criticism of league leadership strengthened the players' negotiating position. But did it? Because from where most people are sitting, that speech marked the beginning of a public relations disaster for the Players Association. It came across as entitled, tone-deaf, and strategically foolish. You don't strengthen your position by publicly attacking the people you're negotiating with. You don't build leverage by making demands that ignore basic business realities. And you definitely don't win public support by complaining about not getting paid what you're owed when the league has been operating at a loss for most of its existence.
In third all time, and this is only their second season. They had to qualify their first bullet point to basically say, when literally nothing else was on, we did okay. Horrible. Unrivaled is now paying reporters for propaganda. Damn. An actual unbiased report. Objectively terrible, but I do love an attempt to spin positive. They're really trying to kill the W for this. Wild. Exactly. When you have this in your back pocket.
She says the speech reached farther than she expected and that people received it positively. But that's selective memory. Yes, the old guard WNBA media praised it, the same outlets that have been carrying water for players throughout this entire CBA negotiation process. But the broader sports world, the new fans who came to the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark and the 2024 rookie class, they saw it very differently. They saw established veterans demanding more money, while the league is still figuring out how to capitalize on its first real moment of mainstream attention. They saw players with ownership stakes in competing leagues making demands of the WNBA. They saw a disconnect between what players think they deserve and what the business can actually support right now. So let's synthesize what's actually happening here. Because the story is bigger than just Napheesa Collier, or Unrivaled, or one awkward media interview. The WNBA is in the middle of the most important negotiation in its history. The new media rights deal brings in $200 million annually, starting in 2026. That's real money. That's transformative money. And the players absolutely deserve a significant share of that revenue. Nobody disputes that. But here's where it gets complicated. You have players like Collier and Breanna Stewart, who aren't just negotiating for better salaries and benefits. They're also promoting their own competing league. They're using their positions in the Players Association to advocate for changes that would directly benefit their business venture. And they're doing all of this while going on friendly media platforms that refuse to ask the obvious questions about conflicts of interest. Think about what Unrivaled actually needs to succeed long-term. It needs the WNBA season to be shorter so players aren't exhausted. It needs WNBA salaries to stay low enough that Unrivaled's compensation packages seem competitive. It needs the WNBA to maintain restrictive policies so Unrivaled can position itself as the player-friendly alternative. Every single one of those things directly contradicts what's best for the WNBA as a league. And yet we're supposed to believe that Collier can simultaneously advocate for WNBA players while owning a piece of Unrivaled? That she can negotiate in good faith while publicly using her competing league as leverage? That there's no conflict between her role as WNBA vice president and her role as Unrivaled co-founder? The old media won't touch this story. ESPN won't investigate it because they have broadcast deals with both leagues. The Athletic won't dig into it because they need access to players for content. Legacy sports media is so desperate for clicks and engagement that they'll platform anyone willing to create controversy, regardless of the obvious ethical issues. But here's what they're missing. The new WNBA fan base isn't stupid. The millions of people who started watching in 2024 because of Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, and the rest of that rookie class, they can see the conflict of interest. They can recognize spin when it's this obvious. And they're not going to just accept the narrative that players are being mistreated when those same players own competing leagues and are using their union positions to promote them. Look at what happened with injuries at Unrivaled. Aliyah Boston tears her meniscus in Miami and immediately flies back to Indiana for treatment. Satu Sabali gets hurt and goes straight to her WNBA team's medical staff. If Unrivaled really had superior facilities, better doctors, more comprehensive care, why are injured players running back to their WNBA teams? Because the WNBA infrastructure is actually better. The medical staffs are more experienced. The resources are more comprehensive. But you won't hear Collier mention that in interviews. The television ratings tell the real story about Unrivaled's leverage. 40% decline year over year. Games regularly finishing outside the top 50 cable broadcasts for the night. The championship game drawing fewer viewers than regular season WNBA contests featuring Caitlin Clark. This isn't a league that's threatening the WNBA's position. This is a niche product with a small but dedicated audience that will never compete with a full professional sports league. So when Collier says we have other places we can go, she's technically correct. Players have always had other options. Overseas leagues have been paying WNBA players for decades. But those options don't provide the platform, the exposure, the endorsement opportunities, or the long-term career stability that the WNBA offers. Unrivaled doesn't change that equation. It's a nice supplemental income opportunity during the off-season. Nothing more. The fundamental question is this: should someone with significant financial interest in a competing league be allowed to serve in leadership positions within the Players Association? Because right now, that's what's happening. And it's creating a situation where the players' public negotiating strategy seems designed more to benefit Unrivaled than to actually improve conditions in the WNBA. Every time Collier goes on these media platforms and talks about leverage and having other options, she's promoting her own business. Every time she criticizes WNBA leadership or policies, she's creating contrast that makes Unrivaled look better by comparison. And every time friendly media outlets give her a platform without asking about conflicts of interest, they're complicit in this narrative manipulation. The WNBA owners see this. They're not stupid either. They know exactly what's happening. And it's going to affect how they approach CBA negotiations. Because why would you negotiate in good faith with someone who's actively promoting a competing product? Why would you make concessions to players who are using their union positions to benefit their own business ventures? This is why the public pressure strategy backfired. This is why that end-of-season speech didn't create leverage. Because once you pull back the curtain and look at the actual conflicts of interest involved, the whole thing falls apart. The players aren't just advocating for better conditions. They're advocating for changes that would specifically benefit their competing league, while hurting the WNBA's ability to grow and compete. And the saddest part, the rank-and-file WNBA players who don't have ownership stakes in Unrivaled are the ones who will suffer if this strategy fails. They're the ones who need the CBA negotiations to succeed. They're the ones who would benefit most from a stronger, more financially stable WNBA, but their leadership is pursuing a strategy that prioritizes Unrivaled success over the league's long-term health. So here's my question for you. Can the WNBA effectively represent all players when its leadership has competing financial interests? Should there be rules preventing players with ownership stakes in other leagues from holding union positions? And what happens to these CBA negotiations when the owners realize they're not just negotiating with players, but with people who profit when the WNBA struggles? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think this is a legitimate conflict of interest or if I'm reading too much into it. And if you want more honest analysis of what's really happening in women's basketball, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started with this story.